My name is, well, I
And
go by
that is
the. Sorry, go ahead.
and that is why you always have a towel on hand. Anyways, we're live now. By the way, when you started the introduction, it was still loading to be live.
Oh,
I
okay.
was going to start it off jokingly saying, like, and that's why you always have a towel on hand to like make a joke that there was a conversation going on beforehand and that we didn't
yeah,
stop talking.
yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah.
this is the Bronx blogger. He's going to introduce himself,
Hi.
or was
So
going to.
I want to. That's cool. I want to thank my host for inviting me onto their channel. Um, and I'm the Bronx blogger. I've been on YouTube maybe close to 2 years, and I talk about red and black anarchism, anti-fascism, and generally try to take the piss out of the alt-right whenever possible.
Anti-fascism? You're one of those cucks. You're a reverse racist. Don't you believe in free speech, man? Someone said social revolution said the towel thing sounded dirty. Yes, that was the point of the joke. The point of the joke was that you fill in the blanks and it could be as dirty as you wanted it to be, and it was meant to
yeah.
be interpreted in a rather dirty way. At least I interpreted it in a dirty way as I was saying it.
It's a part of life. Towels are a part of life.
Towels are very handy if you don't want to make a mess.
That's right.
If you don't want to make a mess of your clothing or sheets.
Yeah.
When do I get these free sheep? Oh yeah, but yeah. So you don't. So you must not believe in free speech then, if you're an anti-fascist.
Well, I am supportive of an inclusive environment of speech. I think that hate speech negates, and to an extent, that the bad faith nature of fascism and the alt right.
Yeah, it doesn't intend to play by the rules by any
No,
means.
right. They're really just there to poison the well. And if we really are a community, and we want to drink, from that well, the guy who's there putting cyanide in the water needs to be disinvited, because there's really no conversation to be had with someone who is there to wreck or pwn or whatever alpha male horse shit.
Yeah, get out and put cyanide in your own water.
Yeah,
I didn't mean for that to sound like a kill yourself joke, but don't poison our water. If you're gonna poison any water, poison your own so that it doesn't affect anybody else. We don't need shit.
They're not interested in that. They are interested in having. When I use the term liberal, I'm going to qualify it as the classical liberalism.
Capital L liberal.
Yeah,
that's the term that I've been using, is capital L liberal, which includes conservatives and neoliberals, essentially.
Yeah. And as a member, as a red and black anarchist, we all use the term liberal in a specific way that sometimes disorients people from outside of our community. I'll say liberal, and people were like, "You mean Bernie Sanders?" Like, no, that's.
No, I mean that's a separate thing where we have our criticisms of like Bernie Sanders and
right, but it's not that he's a both-sider liberal,
Yeah, but yeah, talking about the political philosophy of liberalism as opposed to, liberal in the modern sense that it often gets used to refer to essentially people who have more inclusive and permissive social views in society,
right,
and to some extent have some more social democratic views. But yeah, the criticism there isn't really the criticism there usually from red and black, from like anarchists is essentially, and I mean even like Marxist Leninists will will indulge in the it's not enough to actually fix the situation. It's I would say social democracy is because it doesn't abolish capitalism. It very much is putting a band-aid on a gaping gangrenous wound on an arm that's falling off.
Right.
You know, you should be amputating that arm so that the gangrene doesn't spread. You shouldn't be just slapping a band-aid on.
Yeah, it's it's a band-aid on a gunshot wound. I don't hate soc dems. I know a lot of soc dems that are good, well-intentioned people, and if they can initiate some kind of reform, that's obviously useful. Yeah, it's useful for the present, but unfortunately, like you said, it's a bandage job, and a few years later, that conservatives will come into power, and they will use the inherent cruelty of the system to then implement austerity and then undo even the most modest reforms, as we've seen with Trump, who literally, I think, in 6 months, basically erased any sort of goodwill that Obama did in terms of public programs.
Yeah, I mean, even before then, just sure, it took decades, but I mean, long term is talking about decades into the future, decades and even centuries into the future.
Right.
So I mean, sure, it took decades for it to be completely done or completely undone, but just look at the New Deal around the Great Depression. That definitely reduced the while it didn't necessarily increase our GDP was increased by imperial wars, which is a correct statement. But the way that economists judge the economy is they don't judge it by how people are actually doing it; they judge it by GDP, which is why America has the quote unquote strongest economy, but has a really massive poverty problem that other social democratic countries don't. But yeah, it reduced the burden for your average working class citizen, but ultimately that wasn't, or ultimately
the New Deal. Yeah, the New Deal. I agree with you that the New Deal created an incomplete safety net. It created a safety net with a big old hole in the middle. And if you fell and you fell on the corners of it, then I guess you got caught. But there were still so many people, right through the Great Society with Lyndon Baines Johnson, when America stopped investing in its social safety net. There is an unfinished progressivism in America, and unfortunately, during the Reagan era, they marched crack cocaine through that big old hole into the hood,
Yeah. Social revolution brought up what I think is a good point. What radicals mean by liberalism is the ideology of capital, the liberal tradition with the Enlightenment theorists and the politics of French and English revolutions. It continues to this day as neoliberalism, mainstream economics, and capitalist politics. The tenets of liberalism are values of human freedom and equality, which started as a critique of oppression under feudal empires before capitalism came to dominate, and ultimately over time became the values and ideology of capitalist society, which stipulated that capitalism realized values of freedom and equality. Which, I mean, I would argue that anarchism is essentially the universal application of liberal values, where instead of saying that, hey, everybody has the potential to become an elite in their own and have freedom and some amount of equity, essentially anarchism and just communism in general tends to it basically wants to apply those values universally to as many people as possible without it completely contradicting itself. Like, you can't give fascists the right to organize genocides. If you give fascists the right to organize genocides, that's going to hurt the freedom of marginalized people.
Right. And it is. I think that's an incredibly accurate definition. It is the fundamentally American liberalism of King George is gone. I guess we're free now, even though all it did was free the wealthy white owning class from the monarchy. And they're like, okay, that's enough. It's the American principle of that's enough revolution. 1776 was it. We don't need any more. White men are free from the king, and we don't need any more progress. And that still stands today, even with the iconography of the Tea Party.
Yep.
It's American liberalism. The king is gone. You're free now, and it's really it's not again.
Well,
It's this idea of yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
if you're Alex Jones, 1776 will commence again because they're coming and taking your guns.
It's really funny because the Justice Department today. I don't know if you saw online. The Justice Department under Trump just initiated a gun grabbing of 4,000 guns for people who had failed background checks in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
So they are coming for your guns, and unfortunately, it's your own side, right?
But this is a white man taking away our guns, and he's not a Democrat, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it is deeply tribalistic. It is a BDSM-y in the worst possible way of like daddy dominate me. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like there's a really like
I like daddy. I like daddy dominate me, but only if it's completely consensual and doesn't actually fuck me in the real world.
Oh no, yeah, I'm cool with kink, but I'm saying like they have this self-flagellating component to this classical liberal philosophy. This kind of thing of like, oh, they want a strong man to take their freedom. Their problem with somebody like Obama was that he was a punk. Like he didn't deserve. He wasn't taking it rough enough. You got to be a man. Blah blah blah.
I mean, their real problem with Obama is that he was a black guy. I mean, you can't tell me that the looking at Republican criticisms, you cannot tell me that it was anything other than they hated the fact that Obama was black. I mean, it goes to the Bill Maher joke, which is, or it goes back to the Bill Maher joke, which is, there's two things the Tea Party hates: being called racist and black people.
Yeah, completely accurate. And it's fascinating now that Bill Maher is celebrating.
But
all the Tea Party had to do was rebrand itself with like a bunch of like the veneer of alt hip, and all of a sudden he's calling ostensibly a gay Tea Party or Yiannopoulos the next Christopher Hitchens. So he flipped on his. He's very similar to TJ, where he can't tell the difference if you just rebrand the exact same idea.
Yeah. Oh, but remember, TJ is a rational skeptic and sees through all the bullshit, don't you know? He sees through all sides.
Reactionary commentators have always made, I wasn't surprised when the skeptic community went to the right and kind of even in a myopic sense, like they didn't realize they were going to the right. Even Rush Limbaugh, if you listen to Rush Limbaugh's narrative when he first popped in the 90s, I guess I'm aging myself here. He came with the whole, I'm a skeptic, I'm a truth sayer. That was also Glenn Beck's big thing. That's what the Blackboard and all those things were about. Was like, I'm fact-based. I'm fact-based, you guys. Yeah. But it's really a bunch of horseshit. It's just slathering your opinions on a bunch of arcane facts that you then claw into. It's like Ian Miles Chong on Twitter. Like, here's 6 random facts. This is why it's the left wing's fault. And it's like,
here's why the Nazis were actually leftists, and forget all that stuff about taking socialists and throwing them into gas chambers. Forget about the fact that they split up the trade union, the fact that they got rid of the trade unions and all that jazz. Mm-hmm. They had socialist. It was in the name.
Well, the number one
for what? Sorry. I think that kind of proves that the right wing doesn't know what socialism is, because socialism isn't just something you say that you're for. It's an actual ideology and philosophy that if you directly contradict it, you are by definition not a socialist.
They
You know, it's an
conflate. They conflate, in my opinion, collectivism with socialism. They don't understand that they're collectivist, right-wing political forms,
yeah, yeah.
which is what
Collectivism
fascism
is
is.
yeah. Well, yeah. Collectivism doesn't have a specific political. It doesn't have a specific spot politically speaking. I would say that 90% of people are collectivist in some sense.
Sure.
Um, just by their political ideology. Even like a lot of liberals, let's work together to make the world a better place. That's a very collectivist idea, which I'm all for it. Like I'm all for it. Fascists have their class collaborationism of
Yeah,
that's their version of collectivism is the working class and the capitalist class could work together, and that's the reason why we need to get rid of the Jews, because the Jews can't be on board with this, because if the Jews are there, they won't collaborate with the working class, which is, well, one, it's bullshit, because the whole thing about the Jewish people being unwilling to do it is bullshit, and then it's just bullshit the idea that that economic classes can collaborate and that their interests never directly contradict each other.
yeah. It's a fundamental contradiction. The powerful.
Unity or division, essentially.
Yeah, you cannot. I remember this during the Tea Party era. This idea of you can look out for the interests of job creators and small business owners and employees at the same time. It's not. There you could probably make the argument that because the economy within capitalism, a functional capitalist economy, starts from the bottom up, right? It's a consumer economy. So if you invest
Yep.
at the bottom, it does benefit the people at the top eventually because those consumers buy goods. But they're not making that case. They're making the case that if you give wealthy, and again with the tax cut they just passed, if we
Yep.
give wealthy people money that they don't spend, it will somehow stimulate a consumer based economy, and that's just empirically demonstrably false.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was proven wrong by trickle down policies by Reagan in the 80s. Like
Yeah.
they worked while Reagan was in office, but they fell apart afterwards, and it wasn't because of liberal reforms. I mean,
Mm.
who can or you know, like none of the policies from Reagan, like almost none of the economic policies from Reagan actually got removed to any extent, to any, what's the word I'm looking for, to any like meaningful extent.
Well, he
Um,
reversed his own tax cuts within
yeah,
the first 2 years of his presidency. His tax cuts called a massive recession, and then he
yeah,
raised the taxes up from 27% up to back up to 48%. The only prosperity Reagan ever had was because he raised taxes 14 times. He just did it. He just did
yeah,
it on poor people.
yeah. Which, when it comes to taxes, when you take the burden off of rich people, what happens is that that goes on to poor people. There's no
Mm-hmm.
magic if you take. There's no magic if you stop of if you give rich people more money, that money somehow, some way, going to make it down to the poor. No, it's never worked that way.
Yeah.
The whole reason taxes exist is because if rich people could get away with it, they would not pay for any of the things that are publicly needed, like healthcare, like roads. Like they would never put any money towards it, which would mean that all the labor burden and all the financial burden would go on to the poor people who are the ones who need these in the first place.
Right. They remember that trickle down economics is just again it's fundamentally 1776.
Yeah.
They want to
It,
restore aristocracy because that's was who was in charge in 1776 after the king left. Let's restore. Again, they're ending the estate tax, and the estate ending the estate tax is explicitly saying we want to reestablish a moneyed class where all the resources are at the top, and then everybody else is basically like a serf.
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, also, like you said earlier, I did say something that was factually incorrect, which is that it worked under Reagan. And I mean, when I say, I mean, when I say that, it sounds like I'm saying, like, oh, yeah, it actually worked. Like you said, he actually ended up changing his tax plan and raising taxes
Mhm.
several times. So,
Yeah,
but
and
like when
he
people,
restructured programs. Sorry, he restructured programs so that he could create the impression of growth, and then in coalition with a bunch of fake credit, created the impression of a healthy economy, and then it collapsed immediately when George H.W. Bush came into office. So
yeah,
it was the illusion of success.
yeah. Oh yeah,
Mhm.
it was all like a major facade. It wasn't actual success as it completely like it, it may work in like things may work in an economic sense, but
Mhm.
that doesn't mean that it actually works for the people. It works on paper by some mathematics, but that's
Right.
not the same as working for people. They don't factor in the human costs such as like people who die because they can't get health care because they can't afford it, or
Mhm.
people who die of starvation because they can't afford food, people who die from exposure because they can't afford shelter.
Right.
You these
Well,
are they
there are parallels, right? Meaning that Britain right now and America have parallels in terms of the economics of austerity.
yeah.
There was a lot of austerity passed under Obama that Democrats seem to forget. Obama did
Well,
take his pound of flesh from poor people.
yeah, Republicans seem to forget about what the actual policies were that Obama put in that were bad. They always put the ones that actually helped people and say that those are the ones that were bad from Obama. But no, it's actually the when he copied Republican policies. Those were the ones that had completely destroyed things. The austerity policies, as you brought up,
Yeah,
and I mean, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Noam Chomsky, but Noam Chomsky definitely has a Noam Chomsky has definitely made some observations that I think are more than correct. One of them being that essentially, when it comes to economics, when it comes to social programs, what a lot of people on the right wing will do is they will cut social programs and cut funding to said social programs, and then say, look, these social programs are not working because, of course, they're not working. You cut the funding to this
right.
program in half, so of course it's not working the way it's meant to. And they'll say,
Yeah,
well, got to privatize this now. This
yeah,
has to go to private companies.
yeah.
You know, most people aren't going to think, wait, most people are not going to know about the fact that the actual funding got cut. So most people aren't going to be like, wait a minute, you cut funding to this. Of course it's not working properly.
Mm,
Since you cut the funding it was getting originally and it was working fine and it wasn't overfunded. Do you
mm.
know what is overfunded and is working absolutely spectacularly for America right now? The military.
Right.
You know,
Which is a
it,
form of what's fascinating is that the biggest welfare program in America is the fucking military.
54% of our discretionary spending, and that's just what we can account for.
Yeah.
That's not including the black ops off the book payments that you mysteriously can't find when you look at a U.S. budget.
Mm,
Which the U.S. isn't the only country that does this, but the reason they don't put it officially on their budget is because internationally speaking, it's illegal. It's not something that they're supposed to be legally taking part in.
yeah.
But
Uh,
never stops the U.S. I mean, the U.S. makes the rules, and the U.S. doesn't seem to care if they break those rules.
like the problem, well, the problem, the overarching narrative of the United States is overkill.
Yeah,
They can't spend twice as much as the next guy on the military. They need to spend 15 times as much on the military and fuck the poor. They need to. There is, I think, because of the history of apartheid and slavery in this country, it is very easy to see the narrative of parasitism into a certain contingent of the American working class. And as long as that narrative of parasitism is easily resurrected from its original narrative, which was number one, blacks aren't people, and then during Jim Crow, blacks aren't equal people. Right.
They're people, but they're lesser people who need to be civilized.
Right.
So it's essentially the white saviorhood narrative, which, our white people in Congress seem to push that same narrative even today. Even the Democrats, where it's like, well, no, we've got to go in with military intervention to civilize these savages in the Middle East.
Yeah, even the dehumanization arguments from the alt-righters on their channels are basically we don't consider blacks the same species as us, and we'd rather not. It's like the Bartleby thing. Like I'd rather not. You know what I'm saying? Like they frame their hatred as, well, you wouldn't want me to fuck a dog, would you? Like a dog is a nice pet, but black people need to remember that they are not the same species. And it's a very old, boring, segregationist argument that's so funny that all you have to do is like put some hair gel in a Starbucks cup in front of an old school segregationist, and all of a sudden it's like they're a new alternative media thing. That's like these are very old American ideas about speciesism and all this like debunked fake genetics about cranial structure and stuff.
Scientific racism, essentially.
Which is, what is it, 500 years of that?
Oh, yeah. Fucking measuring skulls to tell what color someone's skin is. I mean, my skull is bigger than, like, average for someone of my size. Like, what fucking category would I end up in? I'm starting to think that the skull shit is bullshit.
Yeah, phrenology has not been mainstream since I think the late 1940s. After World War II, the mainstream of the scientific community threw it away.
Yeah, which, I mean, it's a good thing that they threw it away, but they should have also thrown away Jim Crow at the same time.
Well, there are the religiosity of America creates a population that is deeply anti-fact, the justifications need to be made on some kind of a grand narrative. That's what the alt-right has in their corner right now, is that they have a grand narrative that your Viking grandparents didn't want you to have a black boyfriend. And then, it gives people this sense of like grandiosity of like the last 10,000 years of history have led to whether or not I let this person in my vagina.
Yeah, it's like, I'm 100% sure that my Celtic ancestors who fought on battlefields naked were so concerned that one of their distant descendants might date a black person. I'm pretty sure they had more to worry.
What's funny about Vikings is that as much as they're exalted by the alt-right, the Vikings didn't have any sort of codification of ethnicity or race. You just bred and married wherever you were and whoever you found.
Yeah, literally, literally the word Viking, like, actually meant explorer.
Yeah.
So it was literally just a term for people who tended to not really be homebodies, and they would go out and like try and see what they could find.
Right.
And
they were
like the Vikings found Greenland, for example, and called it Greenland to attract people to it.
Yeah. But it's so kind of it's when you watch stuff like, I don't know if you watch Red Eyes TV. For research, sometimes I watch that stuff.
Yeah.
Do you watch Red Ice TV?
No, I actually haven't heard of that. I haven't heard of them.
Ooh. Red Ice TV. It is the CNN of the alt right. You will get all of their, and they're on YouTube. You will get all of their talking points. You will see all the crossover members from the skeptic community that go on there. Six Hex and Hammer 666, Blonde in the Belly of the Beast, Matt Christensen. Red Ice is um, the Drudge Report of the alt right and white nationalism.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like, or from the sound of it, it sounds like a great place to go for opposition research of fascists. Usually,
Yeah,
I just go right. I watch like I actually pretty frequently watch the Golden One because I find him very funny by how ridiculous he is.
yeah.
Like even though I know that his ideology is dangerous, I look at him and he as an individual isn't anything dangerous. He's some idiot on the internet who doesn't organize anything and looks like a
he doesn't he's not a petty bone. He doesn't show up at rallies or any of that stuff. He is ostensibly a fascist internet troll.
yeah.
But he does have a place in the movement and the narrative they create.
Obviously, like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, when it comes to like danger, I mean, I would even sure, as a physical danger, Nathan D'Amigo, for example, who when you were on Rez Please's channel talking about anti-fascism, you brought
Mm-hmm.
him up. Also, I'm pretty sure he also goes by Base Stickman on the internet. Um,
No, base stickman is another guy.
oh,
The base
he's
stickman is Kyle Chapman.
oh yeah, but yeah,
D'Amigo goes by his legal name.
Yeah, Nathan D'Amigo. He's definitely much more of a physical threat on the streets. But when it comes to like an actual like organizational threat, I would look at someone like Richard Spencer who can go out and rebrand white nationalism. A Harvard educated guy in a nice suit. He could go on something like CNN, like actual CNN, not Red Ice Tube. Like he could
Mm-hmm.
go on to CNN and he could, instead of saying like, "Hey, let's gas the Jews," he could go and say, like, he could dog whistle saying, "Well, Jews control the media." He could say all these things, and people will look at him and think, "Well, he's a reasonable guy. Like, how could he be lying?" Except, well,
Richard Spencer comes from Capitol Hill. Richard Spencer originally was just a run-of-the-mill Republican operative, a staffer on Capitol Hill. So he has the talking point apparatus in play. Now, here's the distinction I would make between Spencer and D'Amigo.
D'Amigo is
People
the street Nazi. He's the
and
definitive street Nazi.
he has prison bona fides. He's articulate. And he is the Derek from American History X. He's the guy that Nazis actually want to follow. Like, they support
Yeah,
Richard Spencer, but they don't like his effete
yeah,
personality. And he is
oh
really
yeah.
just a tool to mainstream themselves. But when the alt-right gets real, it's going to shift the
The
leadership
the
towards someone like D'Amigo.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I would definitely agree with that assessment. But yeah, I
That's a
think
real
that
Nazi. Let me tell you, when I first saw that Berkeley incident, I thought it was a major turning point. Even though he didn't take over the movement, in my mind, there was like a chill of terror. I'm like, this guy is a real Nazi. Like,
like
this guy is a real prison-born ex-military Nazi.
oh yeah, the guy like reminds me of like fucking it like when you look at like a prison movie or something or a prison show and there's like
Yeah,
the Aryan Brotherhood. Like he reminds me of like the quintessential Aryan Brotherhood. I kill people
yeah,
who I think are ethnically impure.
yeah. I mean, that's somebody that, see, with Spencer, he's obnoxious and he's bland.
Yeah.
If D'Amigo
Yeah.
ever gets traction, he will get a genuine movement of people that kill for him. No one will kill for
Oh
Richard
yeah.
Spencer.
Oh yeah,
When D'Amigo takes the seat of power, it'll be like he did in Berkeley. He's coming to do real life violence.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I would definitely say that when it gets to the point where there's an actual like when there's a turning point where there's people willing to kill, D'Amigo would definitely be a bigger threat than Spencer because Spencer can't get anyone to kill for him.
Because
Spencer's some tools.
he's a tabloid celebrity
Yeah,
basically. He's an
yeah.
alt right tabloid celebrity.
Oh yeah, yeah. But I mean, where I'm saying that he's a threat is that he's a set, or I guess I could say that he's the more imminent threat, as in
Yeah.
he's the guy who can make the alt right mainstream, who can rebrand white nationalism and basically serve as recruitment. And I mean, that started to go even down the line towards more centered people like
Mm-hmm.
Sargon, you know.
Yeah,
The,
Mouthy Buddha, a couple of so-called centrist YouTubers, and conversely, my fear of Richard Spencer is that he is a politician and he's a means by which the alt right can gain political power. D'Amigo is the guy who comes after the system collapses and they become like a paramilitary type deal.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, just looking at the history of fascism, um, fascism didn't become mainstream because Hitler just started going up on stage and saying,
Mm-hmm.
let's gas the Jews. Or, I mean,
No,
probably not as nice of a word, but
yeah,
he probably didn't use as nice of a word as I did. But, it didn't start like that. He had propagandists who managed to shoehorn fascism into the mainstream. Same with Benito Mussolini, who had propagandists. Propaganda is how every political ideology puts itself in the mainstream. This doesn't necessarily make the political ideology putting it forward bad, but when you're on the fringes, you need propaganda to become mainstream. You need recruitment, and you need
yeah,
to you need to play the political game in order to do so, whether you be communist or fascist.
yeah. You have
So
to remember also that Hitler was a tool of the Nazi Party.
yeah,
The real force behind the Nazi Party was Drexler.
yeah, yeah,
Drexler used Hitler as a charismatic, but Drexler is the
yeah,
Richard Spencer of his era. Drexler was the guy who got them into the mainstream consciousness. He just pulled
yeah.
Adolf Hitler out of the clear blue sky. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, didn't Drexler also write a lot of Hitler's speeches too?
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
He was just a figurehead. Hitler's greatest strength was bloviating. And the guys behind the scene, I mean, even to the end of the Second World War, he wasn't really in charge. He
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like the people sort of dismissed the extent to which there were people behind the scenes who actually did all the work and actually technically organized things like the final solution, which he barely had any sort of
yeah. Hitler
input
was just the
into.
Hitler was just the rallying point for fascists in Germany. Like all
Yeah,
the brains and all the operation came from behind the scenes.
right.
It came from
Himmler,
yeah,
what do you call it, the brain trust, as people like to use in
yeah.
politics, was a bunch of other people.
Oh yeah, I mean that was actually one of my things when I was looking at Trump, where my concern wasn't really Trump. It was all the guys he was putting in his administration, guys like Pence, Bannon,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Stephen Miller.
yeah, you know, these are the people who it's like I looked at them and I knew what they were and who they were.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just kind of was like, well, no, my worry isn't really Trump. Trump is a guy who can go up on stage and bloviate. Sure, Trump hasn't brought in, or hasn't ushered in, pure fascism in America or anything yet. But, when it comes to, really shitty policy, don't look at who's running for president. Look at who they have backing them up. Look at who's in their corner. Look at who's going to be behind the scenes, because especially as presidents, by like the very nature of the presidential system, don't get to make absolutely every decision on their own. Like, there are some decisions that they're allowed to make, but they can't just make every decision on their own. So oftentimes they're just the guys who are bloviating, and they're a rallying point for reactionary policy. George Bush wasn't really. I mean, George Bush was definitely a part of it, but I mean, he was more the figurehead of starting the Iraq War than anyone else was. I mean, Cheney was the guy who had the big interest in stealing oil from Iraq and lying his ass off about Iraq having WMDs.
Right.
There are. I'm trying to remember what the name of the guy was, but there was a British diplomat, because obviously America wasn't the only country that had to lie to get themselves into the Iraq War. Britain did so too. There was this guy who was a British diplomat who, around the start of the Iraq War, basically stopped being a diplomat, and he eventually became an anarchist, actually.
Oh, wow.
And he actually wrote a book where he was talking about how essentially there was obviously something up, like a lot of diplomats were not actually told the details of the WMDs, and that everything was very fishy, even for people who just weren't in the inner circle. The people who were supposed to be keeping track, they didn't have they had every reason to suspect that the WMDs were a cover, essentially, that they were being lied about.
Yeah.
Which obviously they were, because when we invaded Iraq and we killed Saddam, there were no WMDs, just LMDs, lies of mass destruction.
I think there were some residual chemical weapons, and they were chemical weapons that we had given Saddam during their war with Iran. They were weapons that had been given to him by Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney in the 80s.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. They were like cluster bombs. It was like nerve gas. Those aren't weapons of mass destruction. Those are just chemical weapons.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was the thing, is that the guy actually talked about. And part of the reason I know about this is the other day I was listening to the It's Going Down podcast, where they actually had this guy on. But yeah, the guy basically said that when they were talking about WMDs, the way the governments would classify WMDs was it wasn't just nuclear weapons, like they included chemical weapons too. And they were everybody in the government at the time knew that there were chemical weapons that they had, but they were residual chemical weapons that Iraq had no plans to use anytime soon.
And they were so old that a lot of them were duds.
Yeah.
These chemical weapons don't retain potency and perpetuity. Excuse me for 1 second. I'm getting a glass of water.
Yeah.
Thank you. So these weapons that from my understanding, don't retain potency and perpetuity. A lot of these were duds.
Yeah.
So
that's the thing. I mean, that's the thing with chemicals and chemistry in general, is that chemicals like to bond to other chemicals. Oxygen is one that a lot of chemicals like to bond to, and the thing is that despite whatever storing process, it is very hard to actually make it so that there are no chemicals that they'll bond, because even if there's no oxygen molecules, a lot of chemicals and chemical weapons will bond to metal, or they'll bond to the material that it's stored in.
Right.
So, so if you have an unstable chemical, the reason it's unstable is because it wants to bond to things. And
Yeah.
part of using it as a weapon is getting it to bond to humans in a reaction that is very painful and fatal.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just how chemistry works.
Yeah.
If you store an unstable chemical, it will do everything it can to bond to some other chemical. And the thing is you can't store a chemical without there being some amount of another chemical around, because literally everything is a chemical.
Right, and Iraq's infrastructure for storing these kind of weapons had been destroyed by the first Gulf War, destroyed by bombings by the Clinton administration, destroyed by sanctions that created massive poverty. So what you had basically was a rusty tin pot getting kicked by the Bush administration because there was a drop of oil under the pot.
Yeah.
Well, tragically.
Yeah, that's essentially what it was, is that it was a war for oil. There were no good intentions going into Iraq.
For corporate imperialism, so that we could put up a flag and say, look, they got KFC in Iraq. Like,
yeah. Most soldiers going in probably didn't know, they probably didn't know that they were going in for corporate interests. I mean, I think that there were a lot of them who, if they knew that they were going in just for corporate interests, probably would have saw the whole stealing their oil thing as a big smack to the fucking face. I know.
Yeah, but the American propaganda machine is brutal and extreme, and it frames an argument between. The problem with the mainstream American conversation is that it's one of the few countries where all narratives tether from right to center right, and nowhere near the center and nowhere near the left.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The American propaganda machine definitely hits very hard on that.
And it includes all the publications that right wingers cry about too, New York Times, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Those are at best. If you go to Europe and drop the New York Times on someone's lap, they'll be like, these are Tories, man. These are center right politics.
These are Tories, but no, that's the liberal media. MSNBC. MSNBC, which is the supposed liberal media in the U.S. I mean,
they just fired Sam Seder on a tip from Mike Cernovich, very left wing.
Yeah, I mean, to be obviously Mike Cernovich is very much a hypocrite about the tip.
Yeah.
Because Mike Cernovich literally advocates for rape, and he doesn't call it rape, but it very much is rape. And the thing is that Sam Seder, it's a it was a joke. It was a really in bad taste joke.
Yeah, and it was cut out from a thread also. When I also was visually repulsed by it because I like Sam Seder, but I was like, that joke is gross. But not that it's exonerated, but if you read the thread, it softens it out just a little bit because the punchline, that wasn't even the punchline of the joke necessarily. There was a tweet after and then 3 tweets before it.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, again, even that taken into account, it was also a joke made years ago that, I mean, I don't think Sam Seder necessarily would endorse that joke today.
Yeah. I've done it, man. I've made edgy jokes and they bit me on the ass, and I do my mea culpas, and it's the internet, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to look at my social media posts 3 or 4 years ago, you'll find me dropping the N-word like it's fucking candy. Right. I mean, I'm not someone to judge that someone did something fucked up years ago that they wouldn't endorse today.
Right, because it's so disingenuous, isn't it? It's like, some people on our side used to be anti-feminists. You know what I'm saying? For example, and people ask, don't you dislike so-and-so person? Look, as long as they no longer hold that position, I'm willing to give them a pass.
Yeah. I mean, I also, I used the basic, white boy excuse back then that I was dropping the A version. And I mean,
right.
that was around when I was starting to come into feminism, but like,
Right.
that it was just a year ago that I was told that you're not even supposed to use that in the context of explaining that someone said it, which is
Right.
something that I've accepted, you know.
Yeah. Well,
Actually, I don't.
that's our group, right? Like that is in consideration of the people in our group that are, African American. And if they don't need to hear that word, we don't need to use it.
Yeah, we can state that the word is being said without saying the word.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can say that we could say the N word instead of saying the word, instead of actually saying it. And
Yeah.
like, no one gives a fuck about Louis C.K.'s like, oh well, now you've made me think of the word. Why couldn't you just say it? Because now I've said it in my head.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
that I used to think that was like a funny joke. Now it's just kind of like, really? Like, that's your only consideration, is that now you feel bad because you said it in your head? Seems a bit disingenuous.
Yeah. I think that Louis C.K. is liberal, which is his own thing.
Yeah.
I think being a leftist, particularly in the age of Trump, is a very defined thing from being a liberal. I think that liberals are again people who think that they have reached the limits of change, so they won't call a black person the N word, but you telling them that they can't use the N word at all. Oh no, well I don't want to go that far. A leftist means that someone comes to you and goes, please realize that the struggle's not
Yeah.
over, that there's still work to be done, and you go, I accept the responsibility of doing the work to get it right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like for me with the word, for me, like with the F word, is I'm not
Mm-hmm.
personally offended by the word, even though I get called the word a lot and
Mm.
I am bisexual, you
Yep.
know? But I mean, I also grew up using the word a lot, and
Right.
I called straight people the word all the time, and called gay people the word, and it was. But I find it like, I very much take the position that, like, if a gay person asks you not to use that word, like, have
Yeah.
the respect to not use that word.
Right.
Like,
That's the mile too far for the liberals, which fascinates me, is the idea that because someone asks you to be polite, they're
yeah,
infringing your free speech because they asked you, please don't say blank, and then they react in this extremely infantile. Well, I don't wanna. I don't. It's like, me and Sargon are the same age, and when I see him talk, I'm like, this guy.
it's not
He's
linguistically convenient for me. It cuts a whole word from my vocabulary. What am I going to use now?
Yeah.
Not that.
Why is that the hill to die on? I can't comprehend why Riley Dennis wanted you to say the word they. Have you never said the word they before? As like,
It's singular they is incorrect, except for when someone says that you've received a call on the phone and you're like, tell them I'll be there in a minute, because you don't know what their gender is.
yeah, 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 yeah. What do you call it? Blockbuster's calling. Tell them to call back. Tell them to call back.
Well, yeah, I mean, Blockbuster is referring to a company with a bunch of people, but yeah,
Yeah, the
uh,
you don't know the operators. You don't know the operator's gender. So yeah, I think that
yeah,
you and me are on the same page of like it's not hard work to learn a new word.
yeah. I mean, they, them isn't even a new word. It's just something we're just not used to using it in that specific context. But
Well,
there
there
are
were there are
cases where we
languages that
something.
use what I was going to mention is my second language is Spanish. I'm a fluent Spanish speaker, and a lot of
Yeah,
the time, sometimes you use usted as
yeah,
a you use they them pronouns in a general sense.
yeah,
As a non-gendered pronoun for an individual.
yeah. Usted.
Yeah,
Yeah,
is they.
actually, like, yeah. Actually, I did know that because I took Spanish for a couple of years, and I grew up in like a majority Spanish area. So
Mhm.
a lot of the people I knew spoke Spanish. So I grew up around people who spoke like a lot of Spanglish. So I learned a bit of
Mhm.
Spanish growing up. Um, so like, you know, I'm not fluent in it by any means, you know.
Mhm.
If I walked down the street speaking Spanish, you would look at me and go like, "Oh, that guy's a gringo." Like, you know,
Yeah.
it's not their first language by any means, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, you've grown up on the East Coast, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Massachusetts,
Yeah.
next
You,
state over from you.
especially in Boston, you're going to get a lot of Dominicans and Puerto
Yeah,
Ricans that use Spanish, and it's coming from Boston or coming from Massachusetts or coming from New York. It's
yeah,
very strange to get the whole multiculturalism is destroying things because in the places where we come from, multiculturalism has been the standard for like a
yeah.
hundred years. The concept of different cultures and races not mixing to someone from a somewhat urban environment is confusing because it's already
Yeah.
happened. I don't understand what kind of discussion there's to be had.
Oh
Oh,
yeah, if you
Muslims don't
live in
integrate. I'm like, in my city, Muslims are
yeah,
fully integrated for like 50 years in New York. I don't know why people are like, oh, they don't integrate. I'm like, what are you talking about? Samir runs the sandwich store and he listens to
yeah.
Lil Wayne. Like,
Yeah, I mean, Lil Wayne is a punk, but
no, yeah, I'm not endorsing Lil Wayne, but I'm just like
but yeah,
the
you
people
know,
in fucking in Houston, Texas are like this guy came from Qatar, and I'm like, okay, but see, you're not used to Muslim people, so you think they'll never integrate. In New York, people
I,
came here from, for example, in the 1940s after World War II, and so we've got third
I had a
generation Muslim kids.
yeah, I had a Muslim girlfriend in high school, and her parents were from her father was from Palestine and her mother was from Jordan. You know,
Right,
they like to me that was just normal to see people of other ethnicities. So like yeah, when I like and it like weirds me out when I hear like stuff from like these people don't integrate well in my family like or I mean, I sometimes hear it, although I can, when it comes to like the Muslim thing, I understand to some extent that a lot of them didn't know any Muslims growing up, despite living in an urban environment. Like
right.
my family, at least around this area, my family actually originates like from just outside of Boston. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it, and they moved out to an area that's like where I live right now. It's 45-minute drive outside of Boston at most, and that's like a conservative or no, that's like if you take the scenic route and you decide you want to see every tree on the way there.
Right.
If you go on 495 and hop off on Boston or hop off around Boston, you'll be there, or you hop off on like I can't remember which exit it was, but then go and take and then just break south towards Boston. You'll be there in like 20 minutes, 20,
Right.
30 minutes.
Look, what's fascinating to me is that a lot of these people in the alt right are Irish and Italian heritage, and 100 years ago, these arguments were made about Italians and Irish people who are now identified as white. The same
Yeah.
arguments were made in the early 1900s. Italians are Catholics, Irish are Catholics. They're religious nut jobs. They won't integrate.
Yeah. Oh yeah. My family also, when they make arguments like that, love to bring up that they're Irish and my father's Italian. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, so I'm Irish. So like I'm Irish and Italian. I don't think like these excuses, like ultimately, I mean, ultimately, how they ended up dealing with racism was they ended up taking part in it against black people.
Yep.
That's like they sold out to white supremacy, and I'm just kind of like, so you're telling me that like if people don't sell out to whites, like I hear, oh we sold out to white supremacy, why can't everyone else? And I'm just like, well, why did you guys fucking sell out to white supremacy? I don't want to be part of the fucking system.
Well, there's
The system.
Hispanics doing it now, dude. Have you seen Nick Fuentes, Ted Cruz? Like, it's very
Yep.
strange for me as a dude with Hispanic ancestry to see somebody like Nick Fuentes talking about white supremacy, and I'm like, wait a minute, bro. What's your last name again?
Yeah. Well, no, Fuentes is the right name. Didn't you know that there's a guy named Fuentes there's two guys who are brothers with the last name Fuentes in that emo band Pierce the Veil?
Right.
They're white. They play rock music.
Right. That's what's sort of confounding to me is that brown paper bag test still applies to any immigrants. Within 50 years, if you're lighter than a brown paper bag, you get to jump into white supremacy and point down and go, oh, N-word this, N-word that, and point at your own people, Afro Latino people, and go, oh, those black blah blah blahs. You know what I mean? Like it's I never Hispanics in America are relatively new, and to now see with the wave of the alt-right and even the Tea Party, Latino and Hispanic people coming out as conservative and defending white rights, and I'm like, white? What?
Yeah. I as like an Italian and Irish person, I'm like, what happened to the fucking IRA and fucking Luigi Galliani spirit? Like, why the fuck did we sell out to white supremacy?
The icons of American anarchism were largely Irish and Italian unionists.
Yeah, so it's kind of like I look at it and I'm just like, wow, you guys fucking sold out, and you're telling me that I shouldn't be siding with people who don't want to sell out to white supremacy with black and Hispanic people.
Right.
People coming in from Mexico who don't necessarily want to adopt U.S. heritage, or who don't want to adopt all U.S. who don't want to perfectly assimilate into the U.S. and want to be able to celebrate your own culture.
Well, since when has that been a virtue in this country? The whole point of America, at least in the last 150 years, has been that immigrants bring their culture and it enriches this primary culture.
Yeah, but I mean, they seem to have this melting pot view of we're just gonna take the best parts of each culture and then it's gonna all homogenize into one culture, when really, no matter what a nation you look at, just different parts of Britain, there are different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you expect that to be any different when ethnic lines are different in the U.S.? Not to mention that, literally, the U.S. is also partially founded on white people coming in and not wanting to give up their culture in any way. But their culture also involved wiping out brown people because, well, that land is valuable to us.
Yeah, that's cultural imperialism, right? That's the accusation the alt-right is making against the Muslim world, is that what's happening is cultural imperialism. But only evidence I've seen of cultural imperialism is Western civilization engaging in cultural imperialism in the developing world. That's the only, if you're going to cite facts, cultural imperialism has been a one-way street. This isn't the fucking Crusades. The Moors aren't coming to Spain.
Yeah, as you brought up earlier, the U.S. wanting to go over and essentially put a flag and say, okay, there's a KFC here now.
Yeah, that's cultural imperialism. It seems benign, but that's cultural imperialism. That's kicking the guy making the pizzas out and then putting Pizza Hut in, and you're like, what the fuck? And you end up getting culturally dislocated.
Yeah. It's literally forcing your culture onto another culture.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't want a KFC. I mean, personally, I don't want a KFC either, being being a vegetarian / vegan myself. Yeah,
sure, but look, even having come from the inner city, we literally didn't used to have chain restaurants. You would rarely see a McDonald's. Mostly, and my grandfather was an Afro-Latino immigrant from Puerto Rico. Yeah. You would go to your neighbor's restaurant or your neighbor's ice cream shop or your neighbor's hot dog truck. I didn't see a Starbucks until I was 20 years old. I'm 30. Wow, really, I'm 38. Really dating yourself there. Yeah, I did not see a Starbucks in the Bronx until I was turning 20 years old, and I was like, holy shit, a Starbucks and now whenever I walk around the Bronx, sorry. Go ahead.
To be fair, I never even heard of Starbucks until I was 16.
Yeah, Yeah.
There were just none in the city I grew up in. There actually aren't even really any where I live now. Like, you still have to go to like Boston to find them.
But the
But I
small business is more than just a brand, right? Like your local coffee shop, I'm sorry, is
Yeah,
a component of the emotional community you live in. If when that little coffee shop becomes a Starbucks, you rob your neighborhood of identity.
yeah. Oh yeah, it goes from being that place with it goes from being the place with Jimmy's coffee to being another Starbucks neighborhood.
And you
Where all the white
dispossess the people of dignity. This. Nobody knows each other. Nobody at the job knows each other because of the high turnover. It's a way of creating a completely dissociated class. Excuse me. It's a form of commercial emotional trauma, and I'm sure a lot of amazing think, oh, you're traumatized by coffee. No, there's subtlety to it, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it also gentrifies the fuck out of the place because now that all the white hipsters go down there to fucking drink their expensive and really shitty coffee. Because have you ever drank a black Starbucks coffee? It's the shittiest fucking coffee I'd ever tasted. I'd
it's
rather
it's
go to a
it's a very mediocre cup for the cost that they charge you. It's not
yeah,
really substantially different than the beans that McDonald's gives you for $1.
yeah. I'd rather go to a McDonald's and get a coffee there, and even then, I'd prefer the taste of that coffee over the Starbucks coffee, the Starbucks fucking water with a little bit of coffee bean in it.
Yeah, I mean,
You
I'm
know?
thankful for being in New York because if I really, really want a good cup of coffee, I can actually go to a place. I can actually still find a place that makes real coffee, like good coffee.
Yeah,
Like actually sit down at Hector's and be like, "Un café," and they make me
yeah,
a proper Spanish cup of coffee. But there's so few of those left, man. There's so few of them left, and you do lose something.
but yeah, it also gentrifies the neighborhood because now that it looks like that, we got to get all these poor looking motherfuckers out of there.
Yeah,
This does not look good. We need to get like we need to start like making the houses look better, and we got to start charging more for people to live there.
yeah, and
Because
then
this is
then every corner becomes anonymous.
yeah, it becomes this one gentrified, soulless
Yeah,
husk of what it once was.
yeah,
Like,
and you rob
sure,
people. You rob people of something deeply relevant emotionally. It's not a coincidence that the antidepressants are so up. We're in a society that is mass produced. We're living in a
yeah,
Walmart.
yeah. Of course, if we have to live inside of a store, it has to be the worst, most homogenized, soulless like department store there is.
A hundred, a
I
hundred years from now, my friend, they will look back on America and they will literally, what is there to say about America? It was Walmart.
yeah, you know, well, yeah, just like I mean, looking at I think I literally once said to my father, like, Walmart is destroying America. And then my father's like, well, they started out as a small business and, in capital. And then it's just like, yeah, but it's like, well, that's already a flawed logic because that also assumes that, like, because that this can't be bad because capitalism set it up. When I'm arguing that capitalism is bad because it set up this world without a soul, without any kind of like, it's completely robbed like the U.S. of identity. It's like George Carlin said, the U.S. has become a shopping mall.
Yeah,
Just from East Coast to West, it's a giant fucking shopping mall.
shopping itself is a relatively newborn concept. People don't really realize that, like, shops are not a part of life. Like wage slavery, you didn't used to have to work for your food. You grew your own food.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You traded with your neighbors. You didn't go to a store and buy stuff. You traded.
Your neighbor just grew some wheat and you traded some wood so that they could patch their ceiling.
Right.
You
You didn't
know,
have to go to Home Depot. You didn't have to go to Walmart to buy bread. I think that as anarchists, or at least from my position as in anarchism,
Yeah.
I think that working for a wage needs to go.
Oh yeah,
I
definitely.
think that we need to work for the well-being of our group, and we need to share resources, meaning that 20 people work, 20 people eat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that, you don't have to fight
20
about.
people. Yeah, 20 people work at a 20 people work at a factory that supplies for everyone's need of that specific thing.
Right, and
And
then they partake in
other
what the other factories make.
yeah, what everybody else has made and produced,
Yeah.
because they made more than enough for everybody over there. It's
Mm-hmm.
very much a take what you need, and to some, like, when you can, sometimes you can even just have a few extra things. Like, you can have an Xbox if you want it. Like, not everybody wants an Xbox, but if you want an Xbox, or you want a PlayStation, you want a computer that somebody else doesn't want, have at it.
Yeah,
Like,
personal property. People don't realize that personal property is part of anarchism because they
yeah,
conflate personal property with private property. Private property is buying the factory and saying
yeah,
that no one can have without paying from this factory. Personal property is I made this toothbrush out of bone. And people go, "No, I want that." And you go, "No, excuse me, this is mine. I made it."
it's mine. I need it to brush my teeth in the morning. So
Yeah, and
that,
like you
like,
said, if someone makes a chair and they go, I'll swap you this chair for like you made a hat.
yeah,
That's the ideal transaction because the people aren't going to shoot each other because they traded a hat for a chair. They will shoot each other because the boots you're wearing are worth $600. That will happen.
yeah, yeah, those boots are worth $600, and you ripped me off by paying me only like $20 or something, or
Yeah.
just, as you said, in general, just someone in the street. Those are $600 boots. I can sell those so that I can feed myself or my family or whatever. And someone's been shot dead in the street with no shoes, and that's because,
Crime.
well, we've
Yeah. Crime is
we've
not endemic to human nature. Crime is something that human beings generally engage in because of necessity.
yeah,
And the fact, yeah, please.
because the material because the material conditions will necessitate it in specific cases.
Yeah, people who
Like,
have what they need don't usually engage in violence.
yeah, yeah, there are small groups of people who do engage in violence, specifically being sadists. That's like an issue that you deal with after you've dealt with what causes the majority of crime, because most people don't commit crime because they want to. They commit crime because of some necessity, some sort of material need.
Or a
Yeah,
cultivated need, meaning that people go, oh, look at these animals in the inner city. They kill each other over leather jackets. Who taught that person they needed that leather jacket to survive? Who
yeah,
taught them they had to have a Tommy Hilfiger pair of boots to survive? You
yeah, like, why can't
cultivate. Yeah.
yeah, why can't you just wear the really thick linen jacket that is that you can have a really thick linen jacket that's even more warm than the leather jacket, and is therefore more functional. But the
Right,
leather
but
jacket
you
looks.
haven't been bombarded with linen jacket advertising.
Yeah. I
You
mean, I'm
know?
just thinking of linen because I'm trying to think of like a plant-based material, because there's also the problem with the fact that, you know, animals get raised just to be slaughtered, eaten, and turned into leather coats and leather jackets.
Oh,
Which is
I don't endorse what's done to animals under capitalism. I think that only in the most desperate scenarios should
yeah.
people kill livestock. And to be honest with you, historically, human beings had way less meat in their diet before capitalism. The very modern construct of being a meat eater is a really capitalist thing because mostly people
Oh yeah,
ate.
because you couldn't, back in the Middle Ages, if you couldn't, unless you were a king you didn't
Right.
have very much meat in your diet because you
No.
couldn't afford it.
No, you
It
ate
was
grain, you ate flour, you ate rice,
yeah,
vegetables. People were healthier.
yeah. Well, their diets were healthier. They weren't necessarily physically healthier because of like the
Oh
because of
no, yeah,
like
environmental,
medical
right?
advancement. Yeah, but I know what you mean. Like their diets were healthier. They
Yeah,
people didn't get cavities until like you know capitalism created an identity around sugar and having like sugar as a status symbol. There
yep,
were aristocrats who would make their teeth look like they were rotting if they didn't actually eat a lot of sugar,
yep,
just so that they could be like, well, look, I can afford to eat a shit ton of sugar.
and rot my teeth
You
out.
know, yeah, because
Yeah,
cavities literally require sugar to happen. Or
yeah,
yeah, so when people didn't eat a lot of sugar, they didn't eat massive amounts of sugar.
yeah,
Cavities weren't a thing.
right. I don't think
You know,
people realize how much. You spoke with Peter Coffin, right?
yeah,
Peter Coffin is really great at breaking down this whole advertising, cultivated identity thing, and
yeah.
sort of exposing to you how much of what you think you want is just someone conditioning you to want.
Oh yeah, like as you said, the whole meat thing, like that was like I'm pretty sure that was like late 1800s, early 1900s, where
Yeah,
basically the meat industry would be like, well, be the man at the table, have the biggest steak, but like everybody in the family gets a steak. But you as the
yeah. The
man of the
baby gets
house,
a
the
steak,
breadwinner, you get it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was, everybody gets a steak, but like,
yeah,
but based on your importance in the household. So because you were the breadwinner, you were the man, a real
yeah,
man eats the biggest steak.
yeah,
They eat the steak that takes up half of their plate.
yeah. And then their
You know,
colon collapses from. It's not coincidental that in the mid 20th century we started to develop a necessity for digestive aids,
yeah,
laxatives, um, the opposite of laxatives,
yeah,
Pepto, all those things to stop from diarrhea because we've become sieves for meat.
yeah.
Basically, we become like sieves. That's why our like intestinal systems are being collapsed because again, all these companies do is they run their manufactured meat through our system, and then they give you medication so you can eat more meat. And
Yeah, that is very much the case. Like, they and yeah, that was because the meat industry is like, well, we can make a lot of money by taking this identity of the real man, essentially the alpha male. Like it was like the key alpha male bullshit that persists to this day.
yeah,
They're like, well,
tough guys don't eat salad. Yeah,
yeah, well, except for the fact that a tough guy is probably going to be able to remain tough for longer if he eats a salad. You know,
yeah, and it's like okay, so the Japanese samurai eating tofu. I guess they were, it's this idea that what you eat somehow cultivates your sense
yeah,
of gender identity is so. I mean, we're living in a post brain force world where like, oh, soy is HRT. It's like, no, that's not how food works,
I wish that was how food works.
isn't
Like
it? Isn't
I'd
it?
be, I'd be like I'd be a lot happier.
Yeah. If only it was that easy to change your gender. But unfortunately, most of what people assign to gender secondary sex characteristics are not really going to be cultivated by food.
Yeah,
You're going to need to do um,
yeah,
compound chemicals in
you know,
order to do it.
yeah. Also, when it comes to like, are you telling me that every fucking samurai was gender fluid because they ate a lot of tofu instead of meat?
Yeah.
You know, people didn't people didn't eat a lot of meat back then unless you were a fucking lord. And like, look at like feudal lords and fucking monarchs. They were not the healthiest people most of the time.
No, and
I
and
mean,
the false
the
equivalence
inbreeding
beyond that,
didn't.
yeah, the false
The
equivalent,
inbreeding.
in my opinion, yeah. Sorry,
Sorry,
it's okay.
sorry. Yeah, that it. That was also a big thing, is that the inbreeding definitely didn't help. But
Right.
breeding on top of eating like a shit ton of food that's associated with being rich,
Yeah.
you know, oh yeah, definitely not like healthy
To me,
in
the
any
broader
way.
fallacy is that masculinity is strength. I think that we need to abolish that one. I think that the perils of that paradigm for a society at large are very deep and very profound. I think that we need to let go of this masculinity equals strength thing. It needs to really, really go because it destroys. What's that?
What are you, I said, oh yeah, definitely. But yeah, what are you, some kind of communist cuck? You know, all because you think that we shouldn't just be like, well, masculinity is toughness. You have to be tough to be masculine, and you have to be
Yeah,
masculine to be tough.
yeah. Well,
Why?
I think that as revolutionaries, we're about untethering, right? We're untethering concepts like masculinity from strength. We're untethering gender from sex. As progressives, our job is to untether these um, ideas being coupled together for the sake of capitalism or imperialism or any of those things. And those fundamental correlatives that they create are completely arbitrary.
Oh yeah, it's very arbitrary, and I mean, a lot of it is like a lot of the or part of the reason it's very arbitrary is that it very much comes from a spirit of authoritarianism. A
Right.
lot of it coming from like Christianity when it came to demonizing homosexuality, for example. Um,
Yeah.
it was bad to like it's bad if a man lie with a man the way he would lie with a woman.
Yeah.
When the Greeks and the Romans were fucking each other's brains out all the time. You know,
And those weren't considered also within those societies. Um, those weren't considered signs of weakness. The idea of
no.
homosexuality as weakness came from.
Although they did have the idea that if you were the one taking it, you were the woman, and therefore you were weak. But like,
Yeah, but
being,
that's so childish.
yeah, it really is.
Anyone who
It,
takes a penis knows that it's way harder and takes a lot more toughness to receive a penis than give a penis. Sorry.
yep.
I know we're not supposed to talk about that.
There's a reason lubrication exists.
Yeah, it's not a game, man. Like being a bottom is, or being versatile, being a bottom, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I know this from experience.
Yeah. It's so strange, this kind of like, and it's always those people that really adhere to those exemplars that then end up like it's going to be the golden one that it turns out that, like, you know what I mean, like that he's secretly gay or something, and then it's just kind of like, well, I don't understand why people punish you for what they suppress about themselves. I find.
Yeah. Well, I mean the goal. I mean, yeah. You know what?
Oh yeah,
I'm
his
calling
channel's
it.
super homoerotic.
One is gay.
Well, not he
Oh
doesn't.
yeah.
He doesn't have to be gay. Like this
It's
whole
like
thing of like, so what if the golden one likes to have sex with men and women, or you know what I'm
oh
saying?
yeah, that's
Like,
not the problem. I'm just saying. I was
yeah,
making a joke saying I'm calling it now. Golden one is gay. When we find
yeah,
out in a couple of years, you can say that I told you so.
I'm okay with it. I wish he was okay with it. My problem with the golden one is that he's not okay with his gayness. You know what I mean? Like he's always going on about, oh, no homos, you know?
It's very. I mean, it is very possible that he's not gay. Like, let's get it out of the way in general. Like,
Well,
but
he
it's hard.
definitely has an appreciation for the male body that is eroticized.
Oh yeah, definitely. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. I mean, he also seems to fetishize like the Greeks and Romans too.
What is it? I mean, why is even gay in an identity? I mean, myself, I identify as pansexual. I've had sex with men, women, trans women. To
yeah,
me, sex is just something you do with another person. To me, the reason I opt for pan is because to me, like sex never, even when I was a teenager and I didn't know what pansexual was, to me, sex was just something you did. It's like trying to identify yourself by who you danced with. People are like,
yeah.
who are you? Well, I'm a dance with girls person. Well,
My sexual identity or my sexual orientation can be summed up by that shruggy emoji. You know that guy who's shrugging. I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah,
I'm so
and you shouldn't have to. Why does it even matter? What? It's such a natural thing. It's it's like people who identify as meat eaters. Like, what? Why?
well, yeah. You know, do you only eat meat, or you just like do you subsist on meat alone? And if you do so, you are aware that like
Yeah, you'll be
there's
dead in
so
6 months.
yeah, you'll be dead in 6 months when like when your arteries clog and fucking
Which is
you know
tragic. People. I spent 6 years as a vegan. I don't do it anymore because of personal reasons, but I did it so that I
yeah
could understand, and I was perfectly
yeah
healthy and happy as a vegan. Um, but I cannot. I also feel deep sympathy for people that I don't like that are like these complete dickheads about meat eating, and then they get colon cancer, and some people are like, oh, it's great that he got. I'm like, no, because this person's ignorance has been exploited by capitalism, and now they have cancer in their ass. Like, it sucks, man.
yeah. I'm not someone who's like, oh yeah, thank God. Like, no, the fucking vegan gains. I'm in your face. Like the fucking
No.
vegan gains in your face. Like, I'm glad you got testicular cancer. Serves you right for eating meat.
Yeah,
You
that's
know.
not very vegan, man. Vegan is supposed to be, I mean, at least when I did veganism with my girlfriend at the time, veganism is an expression of compassion. I can't comprehend vegan gains with this whole let me cut your throat shit. I really can't.
Well, it's because he cares about animals, just not as fellow human beings. You know.
But human beings are animals. The whole point of veganism is that you consider yourself equal to animals,
Yeah.
equal to wild animals. So I can't understand this whole thing of like now wild animals are better. It's like no, man, like that's not the point of veganism. Veganism is
That's
that you bring yourself to equality, not bring animals, animals, quote unquote, to superiority.
yeah. That's like I was going to say that that's like very much my interpretation of veganism is that you're essentially saying like what right do we have to eat animals if it's not necessary?
I
That's
wish I could
really
have sustained veganism, to be honest with you, but because I live in the inner city and I moved to a different neighborhood that's a little bit less city accessible, the reason I had to quit was because I had very little access to vegetarian and vegan options.
yeah.
So, I
That's
still don't eat as much meat as I did before I was a vegan, but, sometimes you got to eat chicken because it's what there is.
oh yeah. I am very much like in the boat of like I know what it's like to just eat like what there is.
Yeah.
Like I am someone that like if I could I would like never like I would never eat meat. Sure, meat
Yeah.
tastes, good, but yeah, so it's nice to have a fucking salad once in a while too. Like
Yeah.
it's not, you know, um, you know. Oh, meat tastes great. Yeah, have you ever bitten into an apple? Those are good
Well,
too.
from being a vegan, I learned that most of what we believe is the flavor of meat is just the seasoning.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Meat doesn't really taste like anything. It's just a texture, and then you put parsley on it, and it goes, parsley.
Oh yeah. You get. Oh yeah. You put like salt and fucking. You put these seasonings that have a lot of like salt on it. I
Yeah.
mean,
The
that's where
only
you.
thing the only thing that meat has is fat, and you can just put oil on whatever you're eating, and that's fat.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, like there is a specific flavor to meat that it has, but
Yeah.
it's not a very strong flavor. Like it,
It's something
you know,
you can somewhat duplicate.
it's something that like if you have a steak, you're probably not tasting the beef for the most part. You're tasting everything that's been put onto the beef and applied. to
Yeah,
the beef.
the marinade, the marinade.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the marinade and seasoning while cooking it.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually what you're tasting. When you have a burger, most of what you're tasting like the bread.
Mm-hmm.
You're tasting some salt that might have been applied to the meat. You're tasting the
Pepper,
bread.
garlic, oregano.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then you're tasting the bread, you're tasting mustard or ketchup or mayonnaise or
yeah,
whatever. You're not
yeah.
tasting the beef for the most part. Like the beef is in there. You probably do taste that, but that's not like the strongest flavor. That's not the flavor
To
that
me, the
people
hardest thing
usually
to
are
duplicate as a vegan was the texture of meat, not the flavor.
Oh
Most
yeah.
of the vegan meats that I would buy, it was like, oh, it doesn't have the texture of so and so meat. It was really hard to duplicate. But aside from that,
Oh
once you
yeah.
get used to it, most of the flavor is beyond the base material
Yeah.
that you eat. But I'd love to
What's funny?
revisit veganism in the future, man.
What's funny is that I actually tried to eat like a stuffing that was made with turkey gizzards once, and literally my problem with it was its texture.
Mm,
It wasn't that it had any particularly strong and like bad taste. It just the texture in like my mouth.
mm,
As an
gummy.
autistic person, I'm not. Yeah, as an
Mm,
autistic person, I'm not really the best with specific textures. But
yeah,
give me a salad any day, and I'll eat through a salad. You know,
yeah,
I don't need the texture of meat, even if I find the texture of meat to be very pleasant.
sure,
It's
sure.
just,
Well, to
oh
me,
crap.
vegetarianism is. Oh, sorry.
I, I haven't been reading the chat, and okay, you shop generic. You're clearly a wait. Oh, I saw a comment that said these are important questions, but I don't know if they were directed at me. But like, I don't know if you've noticed, but Gwen, Katie, I think, or Blissful Melancholy, some random geek, anarchist mugwump. Those are a few of the people I know who have been in the chat, which is
Ah, okay. I'm sorry, I can't see the chat because I'm on a phone.
oh yeah, that's right.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. I mean, you have to like exit the app to go to it, which doesn't necessarily make you exit the call, but
Ah, okay. Let me see.
it
I
kind
never
of.
knew that.
Oh yeah, if you
Hmm.
press, or at least in my experience, if you press the home button to look at chat, that's how that's what I've always done when I go onto Hangouts because I
Ah,
use
well,
my
I'd like to
phone.
say hello to my beloved comrades in the chat. Sorry if we got a little carried away there.
Oh yeah, it's fine. Oh yeah, it's completely fine. I'm pretty sure they've been enjoying it from the looks of it. Oh yeah, and Gwen, by the way, earlier said, "Really dating yourself there with Blockbuster, Bronx."
I remember when Blockbuster first popped up. It was so weird because we just had regular home, neighborhood video shops, and then Blockbuster came, and it was so again, it was so Walmarty and strange. I missed my dude that barely
Yeah,
spoke English making like international art house recommendations to me. Like I walked into Blockbuster, everybody was like robots, and I was like, what? This like it didn't feel warm to me.
no, it was the same corporate shit that we were talking about earlier. Like I actually remember it, which is funny because now Blockbuster has gone into Netflix where you can occasionally find like a foreign film. But
Yeah,
I
but there's
mean,
again a depersonalization element. I do
yeah.
appreciate the community element of going to the video store and hanging out with other
Oh yeah.
cinephiles.
Oh yeah, and then getting movie recommendations for stuff that for like
Yeah,
something like a foreign film instead of just like looking through Netflix and seeing a film that was recorded completely in French but has English subtitles.
yeah. I mean, Netflix is nice for bonding. I like doing Netflix when I have another person there to go through it with. But like, I feel so cold when I watch Netflix alone. It's like, oh, there's nobody to talk to. There's no, you're
Yeah,
not. It's not a mutualistic experience.
oh yeah, it's literally something that I do when I'm bored. You know, I go and I'm like, let's see what Marvel series they have on Netflix because everything's very depersonalized. It's just, you're going on the internet and looking at something, and when nobody's there, it's like it very much saps the fun out of it. Like
Well,
one of my favorite things.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
One of my favorite things about Game of Thrones is I never really watched it on my own. Like my mother would have literal parties where we'd skip a week of Game of Thrones and then we'd watch 2 episodes at once.
Oh, very nice. See, but that's very social. See, very nice.
Yeah, we'd all sit in a room. The guys would be drinking some beers. After I graduated high school, I was allowed to get a beer out of the fridge too and drink one.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we would and we'd all sit around in a living room, and also we'd do something that just recently was legalized in Massachusetts. It was legalized on the night of the 2016 election. Is we would all pass around a joint and smoke it.
Oh wow! I didn't realize that recreational had been legalized in Massachusetts.
Yeah, it was the same day as the election on November 8th. Yeah, so that was a very social experience. All of us.
That's cool, man. I haven't been able to touch this stuff for a long time because of New York. New York is still very bad about that.
Oh yeah, yeah, and you had mentioned when we first talked that you have actually spent time in Rikers before.
Very, very briefly.
Very briefly, being 7 months, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Like you should have had, you're supposed to have had a trial by then, but
there were picadillos. There were picadillos about the person that I had a fight with, and that's what it took to process because the person wasn't an American citizen.
Yeah.
And it took some time to sort out who was going to be penalized for what, who was going home, and who was going, back to the street.
Yeah.
In the end, it ended up in a misdemeanor. But I marinated in a jail cell for a little while, which was a useful experience, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, it could have been a useful experience for you, but I mean, at the same time, it's also a very big it shows that there's a very, very big flaw in the bureaucracy of the system too. Which is another aspect of society that definitely takes the soul out of society. That's part of why the corporation can suck the soul out of society. I know that I'm using the soul, which is technically a religious term.
Oh no, yeah, but you're being figurative. I know what you're saying.
But it's the best way to refer to it. It's this very abstract thing in society, around the socialization and the communication that we have with each other, with our neighbors, with our friends, the community, this sense of community. But a corporation can suck that soul, and part of it is because it's by its very nature very bureaucratic and doesn't really care about the people on the bottom and the people around it. It very much will say, well, we don't really care that the people around us are getting kicked out of their homes because property values are going up, because we're still making a profit, because now that's happening, we're getting more. And oh yeah, by the way, let's kick the homeless people off the street. Let's put spikes on the benches or spikes on the windows so that they can't sit anywhere nearby.
Let me tell you, I met a lot of people during my time in jail that were there intentionally because they needed shelter and they needed food, and they were so delighted just to have shelter and food and to be able to put on some weight during the colder months in jail. That's the society that we live in. And most of the people that I met in jail were very amenable people. It's not like the TV version of jail. Most of us were...
It's not like everybody there is Aryan Brotherhood, Latin Kings.
Well, okay, to be fair, Rikers Island is not a federal prison. But, still, even I'm sure in those federal prison scenarios, it's not quite as exaggerated as
Yeah, I mean, that would be an exaggeration to just say that, like, oh, everybody's, like, it's just a bunch of prison gangs going around. Like, it's not the movie Big Stan, that Rob Schneider movie.
I remember that movie.
Yeah,
look, those people are created by the system. They're not those atrocities committed by prisoners don't exist in a vacuum. Those people are produced by a system that dehumanizes and commoditizes poor people, and then puts them in the little gladiator match in the federal prison, and then goes, "Well, you're a savage. Well, you took my humanity away.
You took my humanity away and encouraged me fighting other prisoners.
Yeah,
and then you say I'm savage.
Yeah,
you set me up to fail, essentially.
Yeah, and it becomes a cycle where they disenfranchise you. You act as a disenfranchised person, and then they justify your disenfranchisement by you acting in such a manner.
Which was completely manufactured in the first place. That's all. Like, that's the thing too. That's part of the reason that's part of the reason the Aryan Brotherhood is able to recruit in prison so well, is because, well, that environment has already created a dehumanization for people there. So, take the white person there and be like, well, do you want to protect your race? Come join us. Don't be a fucking Jew. Join us. Don't Anne Frank us or whatever. I was trying to make a reference.
Unfortunately, that culture doesn't stop.
No,
it doesn't stop in jail. It's just that's a baseline of that culture.
When they get out of prison, they're people like Nathan D'Amigo, who are violent, who are Nazis willing to be violent on the streets, and who can literally get people to kill for them.
Well, D'Amigo was a product of two dehumanization machines. D'Amigo came out of the U.S. military and then attacked a cab driver for being Muslim. I think he stabbed him, and then went to prison for that. So he's been dehumanized twice over.
Oh yeah, stabbed a Muslim, probably because, well, the fucking U.S. cult or the U.S. military. When you're going over to the Middle East and you're basically taught that everyone there is a bad guy, what are you going to think when you get back home and you see that one of those people you were told was a bad guy is driving a cab?
Yeah, his crime had something to do with post-traumatic stress disorder, and originally before he went into jail, he was a somewhat sympathetic figure. He was depicted as a traumatized soldier coming back from the military in an HBO documentary.
Yeah.
In prison, he discovered white supremacy, and when he came out, he was a Nazi.
Yeah, and that was because he got, as you said, he was put through two different dehumanization machines that just spit him out on the other end.
When it's done to you, you do it to others, unfortunately, a lot of the time. And Nathan D'Amigo was taught that he's not a person, and then he looked at other people and said, oh, well, if I'm nothing, then you're nothing.
Yeah. And, like, another thing that's, like, really sad about, like, the whole fucking Nathan, like, the whole, like, thing about Nazis, the whole Nathan D'Amigo thing is that even some bog standard Republicans who say they abhor Nazis were like, well, the bitch deserved it. Like, you bitch deserved to get punched.
I mean, a lot of semi-mainstream YouTubers, fucking Andy Worski had a 90-minute orgasm. Oh my god, this feels so good. And then his little brother was like, yeah, he's right. He's right. It's good. It feels good.
Yeah, oh yeah, we're not misogynists. We're just like getting off on the fact that a woman is getting hit completely unconsensually and being put in her place.
And but it was so pure hypocrisy of like, don't hit Richard Spencer. No, he punched the hippie. Yes.
But I mean, yeah, there was a literal there was like a normal, like, pretty bog standard, like, conservative who commented on this post that I did about this post where I shared an article about, like, the whole the girl getting punched at the Berkeley riot, and fucking he's like, how you deal with a terrorist?
Yeah.
Uh,
Louise Rosalba. She's on Twitter.
yep.
Yeah, she's on Twitter. I follow her. She tweets very rarely, but she's around. And then they tried to shame her with like some very naturalistic homemade pornography, and I'm like, she was having a great time. What are you? Who are you shaming? She was having a ball.
Yeah.
Why is she supposed to be ashamed of this super positive porno?
It's because it doesn't look like the manufactured porno that they like. And then they'll also pretend that they don't like it too on the same end when
Oh yeah, the
when there
secret.
there were a lot of neo-Nazis who would like Photoshop it so that the anti-fascist flag behind her
Yeah,
put her in sexualized positions.
right.
And it's like, you know, what is shade, you know?
It's a weird
Like,
correlative. The extent to which slut shamers are deeply addicted to pornography. I'd love to see. I'd love to see numbers on that.
every girl, like, I want girls to sleep with me, but on the same hand, it's like, I hate, like, I hate it when a woman won't sleep with me, and then when a woman won't sleep with me, I call her a slut. It was
I
actually
really
something that,
hate
like,
when women have orgasms as part of this that Roosh V culture of like just stick her the pipe, don't let her come, man. She didn't deserve it.
it
How
fucking,
joyless sex is when the other person doesn't have an orgasm. I'm fascinated by this whole like you can have fun sex with the other. How can you even be comfortable without the other person enjoying themselves?
yeah, you know, um, yeah, it very much is, as you said, it sounds like a very boring experience. Like, oh, yeah, my girlfriend didn't come last night, you know. I was pounding her hard last night, but she didn't come because I didn't let her. Like,
I've heard some MRAs. What do you call that? Red pill philosophy guy with the weird beard talk about how proud he was that his girlfriend cried after, and not the good way. Like she cried
yeah,
like in sadness and pain after sex, and I'm like, why? Why is that a mark of pride?
that's something that, like, when I was in high school, I would notice, like, like, well, every girl is an uptight bitch who won't sleep with me, but at the same time, and then I'm like, well, maybe more women would be willing to sleep with you if you didn't call the women who did, like, the women who had to go through such a horrible experience a slut afterwards. You know,
I
and
I feel like we need to uncouple as a culture. We need to uncouple sex from human relations. I mean, not uncouple it. We need to recouple sex to human relations and uncouple it from like a transactionary
yeah,
psychology. This idea you get sex or you give sex or you trade sex, and just like sex is supposed to be the same as any other basic human interaction. Eating with someone, hugging someone, holding them. I don't
yeah.
understand this whole thing of like I gotta get sex.
It may be a bit more of like an intimate experience, like, and like, I mean, this attitude very much also plays into like rape culture of like I'm owed sex, which
Sure.
like culture creates the Harvey Weinstein, Louis C.K.'s, which Louis C.K., as you've probably heard,
Oh
has
yeah.
admitted has actually admitted to some accusations that were floating around for a couple of years about him basically masturbating in front of women, like
Yeah.
without their, like,
Yeah.
he apparently he asked them and but I mean that's like, one, that's a very weird question to ask, but two, if they go like, yeah, sure, like they're not saying that, like, that's more of like a like fight or flight reaction, or where
Yeah,
like,
and if it's your boss, because Louis C.K. having so much influence in the community, there's an implicit, like with Harvey Weinstein, of like, yeah,
yeah,
I'm asking, but
there's,
I'm telling you.
but yeah, there's the like, but yeah, there's while it's called fight or flight, there is a third response, which is to freeze. That
Yeah,
sometimes happens. Like
yeah,
every human will, in some situation, try to judge what are the consequences if I do this. Can I fight this thing off? What are the
right,
consequences if I try to fight it off?
yeah,
Or should I try to run the other way?
yeah.
And what are the consequences if I try to run away. If I try to run
Mm-hmm.
away, will it catch me and eat me anyway? And I'll
Mm-hmm.
just have even less energy to escape.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's and that third reaction is, what if I freeze? If I freeze, will it find it no longer fun to deal with me? You
Yeah, play
know,
dead, basically.
Terry Crews did the same, like brought up that essentially there was the whole the case where he was essentially molested at like a party
Yeah, it's
by
shock. It's definitely shock. Like it's not something you were expecting. If you were having a
yeah
glass of wine and talking to someone, and someone grabs your genitals,
yeah
it's
the
shocking, man. And you,
guy's a 6'3", the guy's a 6'3" linebacker, and
yeah,
he's like, he knows that sure he could put the guy on his ass, but he knows that there are consequences if he puts the guy on his ass, like
and it
never
was
having
someone.
a
It
deal
was
with
someone he knew in a platonic context. When a lot of people, the first reaction when most people firstly experience rape at the hands of someone they already know. So
Yep.
already you're going through this horrifying, paralyzing trauma of like Tommy is raping me. How, just trying to deal with the reality of this person who
Yep.
is part of my everyday life is doing the worst possible thing you can do to someone outside of killing them is not
Yep.
something that's easily processed that you just go, oh, I guess I should leave. Goodbye, Tommy.
Yep. I mean, yeah, I'm a bit like, I mean, I myself, like, I'm pretty big. Like, I mean, I say that I'm 6 feet, but I'm probably more about like 5'11" and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, at about like at just under like 6 feet, and I'm 220 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't weigh much less than Terry Crews, but I could see how even Terry Crews would be in that situation. And it's like, sure, I could put this guy on his ass,
It's not that
but
simple.
like, what happens if I put this guy on his ass?
Yeah,
That could ruin my career.
yeah.
And
And you could
or
go
I
to
could,
jail and he could die. You can kill someone with one hit.
yeah, I've been like, I mean, like I've been in situations where I've almost been arrested because I've hurt someone in a
Sure.
situation because I've hurt someone in a situation where where like I where in my mind was rationalizing it as defending myself,
Sure.
and I
The,
could
the
put
brief
someone.
period that I spent in jail was from a fist fight. I was working as a club bouncer. I'm 6'5", 315 pounds. And I got into a fight with someone and they got hurt. And luckily
Yeah,
they survived because they got really badly hurt. And I was defending myself because the person's, attacked me.
yeah,
And as far as I was concerned, it was self-defense. But God forbid that person really badly got injured
yeah,
very badly and died. I wouldn't be talking to you right now.
yeah. Like he could have got like it could have been an accident where where his skull got fractured, and
Sure.
the depressive fracture had some fragments of bone land in his medulla, the
And that's not
brainstem,
something.
which
I mean, that's not something that's not something that I'm sure I could live with. You know what I'm saying? Like it's so tough to estimate how, especially when you are physically very large. It's
yeah,
tough to estimate how much force you're putting out because it's a panicked response.
yeah, like I would be able to live with myself if I accidentally broke someone's arm because they attacked me with a knife.
Yeah.
But if like I accidentally killed someone because they ran at me, started punching me, and I like just kind of like um pushed them over, and I don't know, they hit the sidewalk, and the back of your head, if you crack that like near the bottom, it is very easy to accidentally have an injury that hits the
Life threatening.
brainstem. And
Mhm.
yeah, well, I mean, if you damage the brainstem, it can be instant. Like it's not life threatening. Like they're just right away.
Wow.
Heart stops. That's because um,
Catastrophic.
yeah, I mean that's actually like a weird thing about the human body is that it's very resilient in some ways. Like someone can have their arm falling off and not notice it until they try and like block a sword and their arm just flops down, and they're, you know, and then they could get cut into their like, I've seen like pictures from like machete fights where people get basically their face complete like taken in half, but because it didn't hit the brainstem, they didn't die right away. Like they were still alive, maintaining the injury.
Yeah.
There are only a few places that can lead to an instant kill. Like someone can still fight and kill you at some pretty bad points, but there's a few spots where an accidental injury that you didn't intend to happen could lead to someone dying.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
If you break a rib at the wrong angle, it could pierce the heart and kill the person from there. If it pierces the aorta,
yeah. And the whole threshold the whole threshold when you go to court is proportionate force. And when you're a particularly large person, and let's say the person is average size, how do you even measure proportionate force?
Yeah, somebody smacks me in the face, and I don't know, let's say I push them down and curb stomp them. That is definitely disproportionate force.
Right.
Because, well, one, I'm probably a lot bigger than them, because statistically I'm bigger than most people, even though, like, compared to you, I'm still a pretty small person.
Well, you're average size. You're average size. Look, this being this size is sometimes more trouble than it's worth, my friend.
Oh yeah, I'm just saying that, like, I'm bigger than average, being about 6 feet, but like, I'm a big person by most standards.
Sure.
I'm not skinny in any way. This is something that is there. This is something that can happen where, I very much understand the whole proportionate force thing, because it's like I'm 220 pounds and about 6 feet, so like, give or take half an inch, because it could be very easy that it could be very easy that I'm either 5'11" and a half or 6 feet and a half, but not
sure
6'6", but so like, I'm a few inches taller than most people, and I have a good 40-50 pounds more than most people, so like, I don't need a lot of people that are bigger than me. I need a lot of people that are smaller than me, and so, like, if I were to throw somebody onto the ground who's 5'6" and smacked me in the face, well, I mean,
150 pounds, 140 pounds.
Somebody like that smacks me in the face. I've had to learn over the years that it would probably be an even better idea for me to pick them up and physically move them somewhere else and walk away, because that'll stun most people. That'll just stun most people who are like an average size, if you can pick them up and just place them somewhere else, because that is not the reaction they expect. That goes like, well, one, that didn't even hurt. Two, I don't have time for you right now. You're wasting your time. That is something that I have done.
Let's do a time check.
Oh crap! It's been like 2 hours. It's like 8 o'clock. We might want to stop soon.
Okay, so let's wrap up, because I need to.
Yeah, I was going to.
Oh no! Look, I had a great chat.
Yeah, I'm sorry for not letting you know like an hour ago, because I'm assuming that he's like, that he knows that, like, he has an idea of like what time. So yeah, we can wrap it up. Why capitalism kills. That was from the Vegan Anarchism. The Vegan Anarchist, and I probably read that or that's probably just me. It's probably me taking it out of context.
It's a privilege to speak to. Yeah, it's a privilege to be able to speak to other people in the red and black community on YouTube. I know that we're part of the larger progressive community, but it is good to talk to somebody else who's initiated. You know what I mean?
Yep, I was initiated in high school. Like I was initiated in high school around like 16,
Hmm.
and I've only gotten stronger red and black views since then. But yeah, it seems like
Yeah,
we're
well,
gonna.
the environment that we're living in needs this philosophy.
Oh yeah, I agree. But yeah, I mean, so I guess we'll look at wrapping it up.
Uh huh.
So like, I hope you. So there's not much to talk. I'm trying to figure out how to segue. Sorry about this.
No, no, that's
I,
fine. That's no problem.
I've been tongue tied because we've been going from subject to subject, and it's been flowing so naturally that now it's like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I just hope that you have a good day, and I hope everybody else has whatever kind of day they want. Because, well, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. Um,
I really appreciate you inviting me onto your channel. I want to thank everybody that was in the audience and stuck around with us and followed us through our various topics.
yep, and I think,
And I'll catch everybody on Twitter.
and if you look at the video later, I will have the link to Bronx Blogger's channel. I set this up at like midnight last night and kind of like forgot to put the channel link. Remembered my
Sure.
Patreon link though. Hint, hint. I don't get a lot of money, so that would be very helpful. All right.
Oh, very cool.
Thank you all for coming. All right.